Hi, Martin Rust. We're back with Optimize the Moment. I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say about this tumultuous week that has been and what's going on, in particular with decision-making and leadership.
Every week that goes by, we seem to have more to talk about. There's more tumultuous times. That's not a good thing. It's a very sad thing. It's part of our world. It's part of our reality today. But we have more war going on. There's more conflict going on even than last week when we talked. There's a carrier group now off the coast of Iran. There's more attacks on Israel as we speak from all sides in various countries. And of course, things continue to escalate again in Ukraine. We have F-16s now in Ukraine. We have more international troops involved, and NATO continuing to get drawn in further. So the world is even more unsettled than the last time we talked.
And because it's August, the markets have to have their ups and downs, as they always do in August.
The markets have had, I hesitate to use crash, although that's what's been on the media and all over the papers. Certainly it's unsettling, right? So the markets had been up significantly. They were anticipating, action by the Federal Reserve. It didn't happen. There's lots of underlying causes that I will leave to the economists and people much smarter than I am. But there were indicators that people were looking for, and they weren't there, and so and other issues were there. So, people who are looking to the markets and the bond markets and the ability to borrow money and lend money. Which greatly does affect businesses, especially big businesses that are moving currency and capital around significantly. It challenges things. It changes things. And so in this environment, it's unsettling. It's very unsettling. And so there have been a number of articles in the last 7-8 days around how hard it is for leaders today to make decisions, which is something that we've been talking about for a long time. It is, in fact, why I wrote the book, because I could see all of this coming. Optimize the Moment is about decision making and making decision in very difficult times, moments. I did not call it optimize the crisis or survive the crisis. It is so much more than that. As you know, I lived through different war zones and post-conflict zones and really watched people, when we might have otherwise seen them, curl up and retract and react to very difficult circumstances, they didn't do that. Instead they leaned in. They seized the opportunity, and not only for themselves, but for others. They leaned in. And so writing the book, I wanted to kind of pull on those threads. How did they do that? What did they do? And over the last 25 years, I've seen some organizations do that extremely well, and some others not so much.
So what I'm hearing from you is that when you are doing the decision-making, what you laid the groundwork for that has happened in particular this past week is that there has been instability at a global level. Obviously, decision makers in North America or in Europe or wherever they may be don't have control over that. And your approach is control what you can.
Right. So, I talk to leaders in lots of different parts of the world. Whether it be here in Canada or the U.S. or all over. And so the initial reaction is to feel overwhelmed. Overwhelmed by events, things we see unfolding on our screens and our devices, whether it be political. You and I were chatting about politics beforehand. Sometimes with some despair, frustration, things are out of our control. And that's human nature. I get that. If we are leaders and we are trying to motivate a team, an organization, trying to plan, I think this is a time of year when organizations plan for the year ahead. I often say that September is actually New Year's. September 1st is
I like it.
Is New Year's for the business year ahead. That kind of September 1st to June 30th is almost a more natural kind of businessy year, less so January 1st. But people are making plans now for this next kind of cycle. And, there are things that they can do, and one of which, the overarching theme, I would say, is to focus on things that are within their control, and to not focus so much on the things that are out of their control. They still have to pay attention. They still have to keep the context in the sense of global supply chain, things that are global risks, things that are affecting currency and markets and things. But there are factors that are within their control that can directly impact their lives, their employees' lives, and can do so, and their customers' lives, and can do so positively and effectively.
Well, a lot of these earnings reports rely on customer retention, and that is a theme that you talk about.
So job one in this environment, when it's so tumultuous and so fluid, the customer experience. So many companies are talking about customer experience, and it's unfortunately it's a marketing expression today. There are reports out of Gartner and Watermark and all sorts of other consulting firms that also say that companies are actually getting it wrong. They're doing worse today on customer satisfaction and loyalty than in some respects they ever have. So they're talking about it more, but actually they're doing a lousy job about it. And we see that. We see that in our own lives. And I'm sure you do, I do, with the companies I interact with. I had a particularly lousy experience in the last week with my own bank. And it's a question of, increased bureaucracy, increased process, increased, I think it's in the name of risk management, but I really don't buy it. I think it's, companies layer on process. We're going to add this process. We're going to add this app. We're going to add this form. We're going to add this, but they never take anything away. And so as much as companies complain about, government bureaucracy and government red tape and things getting in the way, companies are just as bad, if not worse, in layering that on for the customer. In what used to be a fairly simple, ability to do business, with companies that we work with, have now become quite, process oriented. I tried to schedule something with my electrician just to come in and install a light and a plug and something. Well, someone has sold him an app, and this app now has several forms, and the forms are such, I'm sure it's designed to help organize his business from his side, but what it downloads to the customer is a series of processes that, he said, Martin, I now need you to go onto this app, and I need you to fill in all this stuff in order, that explains, what you need and when you need it, and how the process imposed on me, the customer, something that was very time consuming. I had to download an app that I didn't want, and I had to provide all this extraneous information, meaning in the past I would have simply told him what I want. He would have come out and looked at it, installed it. Simple.
Yes.
What he imposed on me was complexity. And in that complexity, that cost me time, cycles, money.
Sure.
Right? And
frustration, no doubt.
And added frustration. And so what Gartner has come out and said in their report is that even 20% of so-called satisfied customers leave when you layer complexity. Complexity is evil. And so, whether it be the bank, in my case, or the poor guy who's just trying to run an
Sure.
electrical business, and I feel for him, right? He's just trying to get his life organized. But in downloading things to the customer, you add complexity to the customer. When you make the customer try and use a new app or some new kind of form or series of forms.
And having to sign a user agreement.
And you sign user agreements. I mean, in this case, I used to work in the investment business. We used to open accounts. I was trying to open an account. We used to open accounts, for clients, in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
This was a process where they sent me 10 forms electronically that required wet signatures. So I would have to print them off, sign them, and then send them back.
Scan them.
No, well, I would have had to actually print them, sign them, send them
physical.
back, send the physical forms back, and then it was going to take 2 weeks to open the account. Well, in a day and age where I've been a client of that bank for, 25 years, 30 years, maybe longer. They have everything else of mine. They know everything about me, for heaven's sakes. This is beyond ridiculous. So to add that level of complexity, all the barriers to doing business, and they wonder why I'm actually not going to do it. I'm actually going to go to the new startup business that can open a business account in 5 minutes. So herein lies the opportunity for new organizations that aren't just layering new process after new process after new process without taking things away. They're starting with a blank page. And they're saying, what does it actually look like from our customer's point of view? And what does the customer experience, what does the customer actually want? And how can we actually make it easy for them? So this is the advice to leaders. If you want to retain customers, which is job one in a very turbulent environment, keep the customers you've got. And that includes internal customers as well as external customers. Keep your employees, keep your internal customers, and keep your external customers. And then you have a hope of recruiting new ones because they are your best source of new customers, both for employees and for new customers.
Absolutely, it's a network.
It is. That is your best source of surviving, optimizing these moments that we are going through together. I have another example.
Okay.
This notion of starting with a blank piece of paper and actually doing the intelligence gathering, thinking through what that customer actually goes through. My daughter went to university. And when she went to university in downtown Toronto. I won't name them, but it was not U of T. And the university clearly thought this through. They did some intelligence gathering. They were brilliant. As you know, going to university means doing things like applying for funding, right? So loans, grants, buying books, residence, transportation, so bus passes. So in Ontario, that means dealing with the federal government, the provincial government, the municipal government, the local transportation authority. The bookstore is another entity altogether. It's a commercial organization, right? So you've got, I don't know how many, probably 8 or 9 different entities at different levels, right? I took my daughter for lunch, and she had her nose in her phone. I was a little annoyed. And I said, "What are you doing?" And she said, "Actually, I'm applying for OSAP. I'm applying for my loan." She caught my attention. And within a few seconds, she said, "Oh, I got it." And I said, "What?" And so she went through this process. This university had figured out a student interface app that allowed her to apply for her loan, apply for her grant, apply for her scholarships, do her residence, pick her courses, not just buy her books, but rent her books. She could rent some of them. She could rent them digitally or in physical.
Amazing.
She could get her bus pass So all levels of government through one app while we had lunch.
That's customer service.
So yes, that's customer service, and it set her expectations. So now she's, fast forward a few years, what Gartner also says in Gartner's report, and Watermark Consulting have done theirs, and Forbes magazine have just done theirs, customer expectations are higher than ever. They don't just want good service, they want immediate service. They want that
Instant gratification.
Thank you. Instant gratification and the dopamine that goes with it. It is no longer, it's the price of admission.
Yeah.
And there's almost no reward for getting it right, but they sure as hell will penalize you if you don't do it.
And you probably won't know because they're just not there.
That's
What
right.
I hear you talking about right now is social capital.
Mm-hmm.
And this must have profound implications for business leaders and decision makers, because what you described also reverberates with the culture in the workplace. When we had a conversation previously about similar experiences at a bank, the people who we were interacting with weren't adequately trained and had to consult with other people. There were repetitive appointments. There were phone calls. And I just wonder what your thoughts are when you're working in a place that has an established reputation and nobody takes the time to enable you to do a good job. What does that do internally to the culture?
So culture is everything. And the bad news is a lot of the legacy organizations have legacy cultures, and they're very difficult to change. The good news is they can be changed, right? It's not about buying a whole new technology system or installing some very difficult mainframe or whole new way of doing things. Culture is something that can be changed, and it can be changed from the top with the right leadership. There's lots of great examples of that. Some tremendous organizations have, whether they be large, military organizations, government organizations,
Airlines.
that have been in real trouble, have been able to affect cultural change relatively quickly, by virtue of setting the tone. Often it comes from the top. For example, we talk a lot about silos, right? And companies that are set up in silos. And silos are done sometimes by product, sometimes by country, sometimes by other ways. But people are often given responsibility for something without giving the authority to make decisions around that. So that's Business School 101, right? They tell you in every management textbook, do not do that. And yet I see it time and time again. You make so-and-so responsible for this product silo or that area of the business, but you don't give them the authority to actually run that business unit. So one of the fastest ways and most effective ways to change a culture in an organization is actually to give people the authority, set them up to actually run those business units. By all means, hold them accountable, right? Make sure there's transparency, and make sure that they have, as I talk about in the book, the desire and the ability to set a mission, right? Set the parameters around that mission. Make sure they have the team around them that can implement and accomplish that mission, right? But give them the authority to run those business units and get out of their way, so that the missions are locally driven. The more local the mission, the more likely they are to be achieved and effective, and will drive culture in a positive and effective way.
I love it. And there's one word that sums that all up, Martin.
What's that?
Trust.
Absolutely. And when you do that, it drives trust throughout, and magic happens, because there's no way that somebody sitting in an office tower in San Francisco can understand what the mission needs to be on the street in Vancouver. Like, it's just not. And yet I see things where, some poor soul has to get approval for a sponsorship of a dinner, here in Ottawa or somewhere else, and it literally has to go to the executive vice president in San Francisco. It's ridiculous. That person knows nothing. But I'll tell you, there's 14 forms along the way and all kinds of cycles and process that have to happen in between. For that $5,000 sponsorship, no doubt they've spent multiples of that amount just getting the approval done.
Waste of money.
Waste of time, cycles, money, all kinds of frustration. It is so counterproductive, it's not even funny. Instead, the opportunity is to give the person that owns that business unit the authority to run that business unit, to define the mission and say, this is on mission or it's not. We're going to do it or not. Run with it.
I think what the magic that you talk about with that is what you're suggesting is a paradigm shift, where when you trust someone, what you're saying is, I believe in you until you prove otherwise. Whereas the current system seems to be, you've got to prove yourself before I believe in you. And that puts a different type of stress and psychological imposition on people. In terms of belonging, I would imagine. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it says I don't trust you and I'm not going to trust you. In the system that I'm talking about, it simplifies things greatly. And yes, of course, it says I trust you. But even if, people make mistakes, it's okay,
yes.
Right? Because then, and again, I go back to the Merrill Lynch experience, which was I'm a Merrill Lynch fan. That experience for me was a very positive one. Not everything worked out 100%, but when managers were allowed to run their business units, even when they made a mistake, what it encouraged them to do is to put their hand up and say, you know what, that didn't work out. Mm-hmm. I've learned from that. The next time I will do things differently.
A mistake is not failure.
A mistake is growth and an opportunity. It is a moment, from which to learn and lean in.
So you optimize the moment.
Exactly.
By being empowered.
But if you don't give people that opportunity, right, they will never grow from them. So in these turbulent times, ever more turbulent, and I firmly believe they are likely to get more so.
Oh dear.
These are opportunities. This now is the time for business leaders to lean in and make, grab hold of the levers that they actually have control over and do some of those smart things, right? Give their people authority to make decisions over the business units that they have and focus on, those internal and external processes
mm-hmm.
and get the process out of the way, right? Simplify the lives of, your internal customers as well as your external customers. Simplify things for people. Understand what it means to be a customer and recognize that all this process and red tape that you've added on for them really is a problem. It's a problem for the local electrician who's just trying to earn a living, as well as the big companies, whether it's your cell phone provider, whether it doesn't matter. Every step of the way in our lives have become far more complicated. And the organizations that can reduce the hassle, reduce the red tape, as you know, I lived overseas for a long time. When I came back to Canada, I was astounded that we now live in an environment where somewhere along the way, it became okay to pay more for the privilege of doing things ourselves.
Yes.
How did that happen? It's under the name of, better customer service. It's not better customer service. If I have to do things more myself and pay for it, that's not better customer service. So, paying my bank to send me a whole bunch of forms and things that I have to complete and do and take hours out of my time and my day to do, that's not better customer service. Finding a way to do things faster, simpler, easier for me, that's better customer service. That's where I'm going to go. That's where I'm going to take my business. But when I go to the coffee shop and I pay $5 for a cup of coffee and he hands me a cup and says, it's over there, go fill it for yourself, I'm not going back there.
Oh, and then they ask for a tip.
And then they ask for a tip.
Because the app has that built in.
Right.
Because it's harder for you to not give a tip than it is to give a tip for something that you actually provided the labor for.
Right.
Yeah.
But somewhere along the way, that became okay. And so our generation is struggling with that. And I can tell you, the younger generations that want this instant gratification and a different kind of customer service are not going to put up with it. Certainly not from the bigger organizations and not from their governments. They have an understanding that things can work differently. And just because they're not doing it doesn't mean they can't do it. It just means that they haven't figured it out.
It feels like there are two parts to this. One is immediacy, and interesting that you mentioned the dopamine hits of having something instant gratification. The other is a big, big part of it, which is convenience. When they started pushing out kind of an electronic version of doing business, it was supposed to be for our convenience. But they forgot about the convenient part. They made it inconvenient. This is a theme I'm hearing from you. They lost the plot.
Well, somewhere along the way, and I'm a consultant, so I can say this, I blame consultants, right? Consultants somehow said, if you push all this out onto the customer, let them fill out all the paperwork and do all the process, then you don't have to do it.
Saves you time and money.
But I don't believe that it does, right? All of the research I've read from Gartner and everybody else says it doesn't actually save anybody time and money. The companies still have to process this stuff, and all they've done is added layers.
Oh, I agree, but this is what it's sold as.
It is. That's what
right?
it's sold as.
Phoenix.
Well,
you send your best salespeople in and tell them it's going to make their lives easier.
And so there's two aspects to that. Companies are out there always selling the new and shiny thing. Mm-hmm. And I get that. But I think we've come to a point with technology in particular where just because there is an iPhone 15 doesn't mean that we need it. And quite often, and I'm just using this as an analogy, it has nothing to do with iPhones, but the iPhone 8 works just fine. And in fact, if we could figure out how to make the iPhone 8 work in our lives, we actually would be much better off. It's the analogy that's relevant, especially for small and medium-sized businesses. And as we've said before, 98% of businesses in Canada are small and medium-sized businesses struggling to stay afloat, trying to figure out, where do they invest?
Yeah.
How do they retain the customers they've got, recruit new customers, and pay the bills in a world where everything's just the affordability of things has gone up like crazy. So sometimes it makes sense to invest in things. Sometimes it makes sense to figure out how to use the things we have better.
And sometimes it means investing in people.
It does. And, adding layers of process, especially for our customers, most of the time they won't tell you why they're leaving.
Yeah.
They'll just leave. Sometimes they will. But, 80 to 90% of the time, they'll just leave. And they won't, they're too polite to tell you why they're leaving. But we do live in very turbulent times when we have enough on our plate to manage our supply chains and where we're going to get our product from and how we're going to, where we're going to get staff from, and all these other difficult things in running our businesses, job one has to be to keep the customers that we've got. And in order to maintain and actually build that customer experience the way we think we want to, right? Because that, it can't just be marketing, right? It has to be done on the delivery side. And one of the levers that business leaders actually do have control over is to simplify the experience for customers.
Question for you. Why do you think it is, and this is more of a Canadian question, but I think it also applies to the Magnificent Seven. I'm thinking about our telcos. It's an oligopoly. And the customer experience, I think, is pretty universal in Canada. We pay too much. There is no customer service. They don't seem to care when you have a problem, but when you're about to leave, they'll throw deals at you to keep you, but you've already lost faith in the actual product. But the problem is, wherever you go, there you are. You're going to have the same problem with the competition. So they kind of have a hold on the customer experience as an oligopoly. What you talked about earlier was having that new startup, the starting from the ground up. That's competitive.
Yeah. So, in Canada, the answer to this is going to be, breaking the competition, right? So breaking in and getting new competitors into the marketplace.
That's policy.
And that's policy. So as we've also said many times, technology is not the problem. There's all kinds of technology. It's great technology. Technology is the relatively easy part of the problem. Policy, and this is a lesson for business leaders too, right? It's in any organization, it is about policy. You can change things when you want to. You simply have to have the will to change it. And whether that's culture, whether that's process, you can get process out of the way if you want to. With the snap of your fingers, it is when I say it is a lever within your control, it is absolutely a lever within your control. You can get rid of stuff when you want to. I walked into a bank the other day, and the very well-intentioned, good people behind the counter told me that X, we'll just say X, was the law. And I said, okay, well, show me the law. And she said, well, blah, blah, blah. It's not actually the law. It's a policy. I said, okay, well, show me the policy then. I'd like to see the written policy. And she swore up and down that this was a high level, one of the OSFI kind of regulator type policies. And by the time we ended up, as you know where this is going, by the time we ended up, it was none of those things. This is just something that they had been doing for a long time, and so it had become an established norm. Wasn't a law, wasn't a regulator policy. I'm not even sure it was a bank policy. It was just something that they had been doing for so long, but it had become part of their culture, that they had just done it for so long, they just got used to asking for it. So business leaders, you can get rid of that stuff. You just have to have the mindset and the determination, or give somebody in the organization the authority to get rid of that stuff. You will make your customers so much happier.
A lot of also what you're talking about is decentralization.
Well, giving people the authority to make decisions, and by all means, define the mission, define the parameters of that mission, give people the parameters, and then within those parameters, absolutely give them the authority to go out and conquer the mission within those parameters.
So you're building the frame, and they get to build the house any way they want it, as long as it does what it's supposed to do, type of thing. And you may get a variety of different approaches that all work. Yep,
and the model, the example that I've seen work and work very well, it's defined in the book, is a military command structure, right? So people are given training, they know to trust each other, right? Because they've all had the same kind of training.
Critical.
And so when they go to the field, they're going to have different ways of executing on some things, because they're going to come up against different things. And they're each going to come up against different experiences. But, they rely on their training, they rely on their common sense, they rely on, real world experience, but they know what the mission is. First and foremost, mission, and they know what the parameters of that mission are, and they know to put the mission first, and they work together as a team, knowing they've got each other's back towards achieving that mission. And it is absolutely magic what they can accomplish with that mindset. And when they've achieved that mission, right, it is absolutely inspirational to go on and achieve the next one.
So that's a formula, really, because militaries they live and die on logistics.
Literally.
So what you just explained to me was, we're going to properly train you. That's an early step. So what we're saying is we're investing in you as people. Then when everybody's properly trained, they trust each other because they know that they know what to do. And when they trust each other, what you're saying here is that they can adapt. So adaptability is a big part of this equation for leadership.
Well, it's not rocket science, right? I mean, this is culture. It's led from the top, and the training is directional. It's motivational. It is giving people authority. It is, but we're not talking about building rockets here. It is not. It does not require advanced degrees. It is, here's what the rules are. Here's what, if this, then that. You do this, and we all work together. And that I've had that same training, and I know that you've had that training, and we're going to trust each other because of that. And it's amazing how quickly organizations can move forward when they know that.
And they're all looking in the same direction.
Exactly.
Which is forward. So when we're talking about instability and kind of what's going on in the bigger picture, a lot of what you're talking about is also retaining good people and attracting good people. And this sounds like a virtuous cycle. If you take the approach that you're suggesting to optimize the moment, it will actually reward you in addition, because good people will want to be a part of that culture. Is that fair to say?
It's certainly been my experience that people want to be a part of organizations that are strong, ethical, going forward with purpose, where the cause, you can define the cause, and it is less about money. Money is, we all need money to live on. We all need a roof over our heads and some food on our table. There's no question about that. I'm not taking away from that. But people want to be part of something, where they feel they can contribute, where they can define their role, in that cause. I can certainly tell you that from my time overseas, it was not about money. It was about, I understood what my role was, and kind of the impact that I had, and that meant far more to me and my colleagues, the people that I worked with, who were amazing people. Right? It was, it was as Senator McCain used to talk about all the time. It was that cause greater than self, and that's definable in a variety of ways. So that kind of personal motivation is kind of, if it's not tick number one, it's right up there on that list. That's a human desire.
I can attest to that from being a former rower. and that sense of belonging, where you're all going blind in the same direction.
Yeah.
Your back is to the finish line.
Mm-hmm.
You're looking at a coxswain.
Mm-hmm.
You have to trust that coxswain,
Yep.
regardless. And, there are moments where you may crab in the boat, which means the boat stops dead. Nobody looks around to see who did it. You just pick up and keep going. But I remember having late night study sessions and having to get up at 4 a.m. And you wake up and you just think, I can't get out of bed. And then you think, oh, if you're not the only one there, your entire team can't move forward.
Right.
So being part of something greater than yourself, belonging to something, does get you out of bed in the morning. And it's a way better reward. Some of the studies demonstrate that the higher the CEO's salaries are, the less productive they are. There's a negative correlation to a certain point. Like having a really good payload is great. But once you get beyond a certain point, and we're talking about the land of immortals, you're just keeping up with new sets of people. So it's still never enough.
Yeah.
And it shifts your focus. So you're right, money is not the main purpose that gets people to success. I think Steve Jobs is a great example of that.
There are some great organizations that have got it right over the years. Those salary levels, I think, just put people in categories. So if you make X, then you're just in category X. If you make Y, then you're in category Y. But we keep coming back to this theme that a lot of those great or very, very large organizations are really stumbling right now. And we're seeing some big, less than perfect decisions, even from some companies that we might not otherwise expect it, because we are in really, really, really difficult times as we head towards the U.S. presidential elections in November. Very rocky markets, very rocky global influences. Even coming out of the presidential elections, even once it happens, it's probably likely to be very unsettling for a year or so afterwards. Where's the money? Where's the money? The capital going to flow? How is it going to flow? In Canada, we're looking at another election. You could go on and on, and these are things that for business leaders, at a time when customer expectation, and it's not me, these are survey after survey, says customer expectations are higher than they've ever been, shareholder expectations are higher than they've ever been. If you're a CEO, you're getting paid in part because it's a no-win situation. Boards are looking to C-suites and saying, you're in an impossible situation. Go win, right? And this is why I wrote the book. This is why I wanted to provoke this discussion and say we need new models. We need new business models. We need new models for decision making. We need to look at things fundamentally differently, in some ways drawing on the past and how things have been done before, and in some ways looking at a blank sheet of paper, how we would do things if we didn't have the legacy, if we didn't have how they have been done before at all, and starting afresh. And I think it's a healthy discussion to have now, but it's an imminent one. It's an urgent one. It's one that a lot of organizations, both for-profit organizations and not-for-profit.
And it's how you optimize the moment.
It is.
So Martin, how can people learn more about your approach?
Well, buy the book, I suppose, is one. That's where you're leading to, and it's available on Amazon and in Indigo here in Canada, and Barnes & Noble in the U.S., and Waterstones in the U.K.
And it's getting some good traction.
It is.
So I think we have to point people in that direction. And I would like to just ask you something on a personal level. When you talk about the markets, you have met Warren Buffett.
I have.
And Warren Buffett made some interesting decisions of late, pulling out of certain banks. And, some people will say it's an indication of one way of thinking. Other people will say, no, this is a very measured approach. What did you learn from your time with Warren Buffett?
Well, in my time in the investment community, I had the great pleasure to work with some people who really were Warren Buffett disciples. And so they, from them, I learned the whole, value investor philosophy. And that was about this notion of keeping your expectations low. I actually watched him give a speech about who he would want to marry. Right, and
interesting. Should we go there?
Well, he said he was giving a speech to a university crowd and said, who do you think you should marry? Is it the smartest or the prettiest or the right and he
wealthiest
said,
or
the wealthiest, right? And he goes through the whole category,
craziest.
and he said, I'm going to tell you, you should find the person who you can keep their expectations lowest, because it's for the long haul. And over the long haul, right, you've got to be able to meet each other's expectations. And, he got a lot of laughter and, of course, cynicism. And when you think about it, from a value investor point of view, what he was trying to say, I think, is a little bit about what I've been talking about with customer expectations and actually listening to what people want. And he's bought companies over the years that have been very odd, right? Not aligned. He's bought train railway companies. He's bought Fruit of the Loom underwear companies. He's bought all sorts of different companies that, on the surface of it, you'd think, why on earth would he buy all these very disparate, not aligned companies? But he really has been focused on who are the customers, who are the people over the long term, are going to understand these companies and continue to buy them and be good, solid customers of these companies, not just today and tomorrow, but over the long haul. And he's understood who the customers are, and they don't have to be super rich and wealthy, right? And when he bought a lot of Walmart stock, he recognized that Walmart was not the company that was going to satisfy the rich and ultra rich. It was going to be for average America, and average America was going to be the one that kept Walmart going for a long time. So when we talk today about if one of the levers that business leaders have today is to listen to who your customers are and pay very close attention to what they can sustain, not just today, but tomorrow, especially through very difficult times.
And this applies from war zones to boardrooms.
From war zones to boardrooms.
Optimize the moment when strategic planning fails.
Yep.
Thank you, Martin Rust. It's been a pleasure as always.
Thank you. My pleasure.